Hi, my name is Cynthia Trejo.
I'm Catherine Martin, but I'm Kitty, not Catherine.
I'm McKenna Cahill. We're all seniors at Towson. This is a project, like you said, for our social services class, just to raise awareness around the community for deafness. So I guess we'll start with, we just want to know how, kind of get a ballpark for what do you guys know about deafness or hearing loss?
Pretty prevalent in the fire department. We rode around for years with the window down, the sirens going. When we all turn to 60 or so, we'll have some kind of deficit.
That's what we've heard, so we're excited about this. Able to share with you guys. Anyone else?
And we also know that there's a huge deaf community in Maryland because of the services that we provide. And we want to do a better job for the people we serve. So we know we've got some ground to cover, so to speak.
Okay, anyone else? Anything at all? Don't be shy. No?
You saw it brought out.
That's all right. We're going to start with something called the unfair hearing test, so you guys get a little bit of a better idea of what it's like to have a hearing loss, what it's like to hear with a hearing loss. So we're going to pass around those papers and get started with that quick little quiz. And we're going to start it now, and it gives a little bit of an introduction, so it'll explain itself.
Hearing test. The words have been carefully chosen so that they are easily confused with other words which sound much the same, and we have rigged the test to prove a point. You will hear the list of words 3 times. First, filtered as though you had a slight high-frequency hearing loss. People with this degree of impairment often do not even realize they have a loss. In fact, they get very indignant when their friends suggest that they may have a hearing problem. At other times, they are very frustrated because they think everyone is mumbling, even when they're not. We will also speak just a little softly, so you will have to concentrate hard on hearing the words correctly. You are to write them down. We think you're going to have a little problem getting them 100% right. Remember, we are giving you a little hearing loss as you listen to the test. Go ahead, try it. Write the words in column A on the worksheet. Here's the list. Ready?
Number 1, fill. Number 2, catch. Number 3, thumb. Number 4, heat. Number 5, rise. Number 6, wedge. Number 7, fish. Number 8, shows. Number 9, bed. Number 10, tooth.
Now, we will repeat the list without eliminating any of the high or low frequencies, just as though you had normal hearing. But again, just a little softly, so it isn't too easy for you. This time, use column B to write them down.
Number 1, fill. Number 2, catch. Number 3, thumb. Number 4, heat. Number 5, wise. Number 6, wedge. Number 7, fish. Number 8, shows. Number 9, bed. Number 10, juice.
Was that better? Good. I'm still not willing to bet that you got them all right. There are some tricky words on the list. Now comes the interesting part. This time, instead of filtering out the high frequencies, we are going to put in a little more of them. It will sound as though you are wearing a hearing aid, which is compensating for your hearing loss. by giving extra emphasis to the frequencies that you don't hear so well. Try it once again. This time, write the words in column C.
Number 1, fill. Number 2, catch. Number 3, thumb. Number 4, heap. Number 5, wise. Number 6, wedge. Number 7, fish. Number 8, shows. Number 9, bed. Number 10, juice.
Now, if your hearing is normal, you should have done as well on column B as on column C. But even with reasonably normal hearing, the third reading, with a little high-frequency emphasis, probably sounded a little more distinct than the normal reading of list B. We said it was an unfair hearing test. Did list C sound a lot sharper? If it did, you may have enough of a hearing loss to want a professional hearing test. It is now time to turn the record over. You might want to take a little break and check the words on your list.
Okay, so how do you guys think you did?
Not good.
Not good? What did you guys put for number 1?
Fill.
Phil? 2?
Catch.
3?
Thumb.
4? 5?
What? I had 5.
6? 7?
Fish.
8?
Choose.
9?
Bed.
10? Okay, you guys did pretty good. We'll give the answers at the end, so keep you guessing. All right.
All right, so we're gonna start by giving the anatomy and like the physiology of the ear so that we get a better understanding of how there can be different parts of the ear that have a hearing loss, and we can understand the structure of it to better understand hearing loss and deafness altogether. Okay. So there's 3 parts of the ear. You have your outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. It's pretty simple. We'll start with the outer ear. There's the pinna, which is this part you can actually see. And so when you see people and they're making like this to hear, they're actually just making their pinna bigger because the pinna is used for localization of sound. It's used to funnel sound into your ear. It's used for localization, so you can find out where sound is coming from. Then you have your external auditory meatus, which is, it's your ear canal, simply enough. And this is also used to funnel sound more into your ear. And then we have the tympanic membrane, which is the eardrum. Some people debate if this is the outer ear or the inner ear because it's right in the middle of what separates the two. So we're gonna say it's kind of part of both. And the eardrum reacts to the sound. So when the sound comes and hits your eardrum, it's actually moving back and forth, which is pushing the sound through the other parts of your ear. So now we have the middle ear. Connected to your eardrum are 3 small baby bones. They're the smallest bones in your body. They're called the ossicles. There's the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. The malleus is connected to your eardrum. The incus is connected to the malleus, and the stapes is connected to the incus. And they all move in accordance in that way. So when the eardrum moves, the malleus moves, which moves the incus, which moves the stapes. This is mechanical energy. So we're moving the sound through your ear as mechanical energy. There's also the eustachian tube, if you see down there. This isn't really a part of hearing necessarily, but you know when your ears feel really clogged or like your sinuses are really full, it's because there's fluid in your eustachian tube. So it's like a drain. So kind of gross, but that's anatomy. And then we have the inner ear. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated because there's a lot of parts of the inner ear. This is what really makes up your hearing, how your brain hears, is through your inner ear. So we have the oval window, which we have, it's right here. It's connected to the stapes. So when the stapes moves, it's pushing against this oval window. So inside, this is your cochlea, this like shell-looking figure. In your cochlea, there are little tiny hair cells called cilia, like they're in your nose too, and this is what moves. They stand upright and there's fluid that's all within here. So when the stapes moves and it pushes against the oval window, it's pushing this fluid through your ear, which is moving against the cilia. This creates electrical energy that then travels all the way through up into your auditory nerve. So this is how we process sound. We have this auditory nerve. It's taking the electrical energy and it's going to our brain now. So that's down here. We have the sound, it's in our auditory nerve. It goes up through the brainstem, and then this gets kind of weird, that our left ear, our left cochlea, sends the sound to our right auditory cortex, and then vice versa. The right ear sends to our left auditory cortex. So our brain goes, and it's taking the sound, processing the sound, and then there's all different compartments of the auditory cortex that actually process the sound for what it is. And we just won't even go there because that is a lot of information, but this is just a general structure and the anatomy of how our ears work. So now we have to understand that there are two different types of hearing. We think we know of the sound that comes through our ear, what we just talked about goes through your outer ear, your middle ear, your inner ear, but there's also another type of sound, and this is your bone conduction. Your hearing is through your bone conduction. So if you all feel behind your ear here, you have a bone there. This is your mastoid bone. So the mastoid bone, it vibrates when sound is near, and this sound, it bypasses the outer ear, it bypasses the middle ear, and it goes straight to your inner ear, and it moves that fluid again and creates that electrical energy. So there's some people who have hearing loss in their outer ear or their middle ear, but they can still hear because they're hearing from that vibration. They're hearing from their mastoid bone. So I always thought that was really cool when I learned about that we have bones that vibrate and we hear. How incredible. So those are the two different types, air conduction, bone conduction. All right. So now let's talk about hearing loss. So we now understand how we hear. There's two different types of hearing. So now, how does hearing loss work? So what we're looking at here is an audiogram. On the left here, we have the loudness, which is measured in decibels. Across the top, we have the frequency, which is the pitch, the pitch of what you're hearing. That's measured in hertz. So the normal hearing, we won't go too deep into the breakdown, but you have normal hearing, which is above 25 decibels. Then you have mild hearing loss, moderate hearing loss, moderately severe hearing loss, and profound hearing loss. So if you have a profound hearing loss, you're not hearing anything. But as most people, I say, would have a hearing loss around this moderately severe, they're like deaf. And I put this audiogram over here to give you representation. We just did the unfair hearing test, and when you were listening and it was saying like, oh, we're taking out the high frequencies, they were taking out this end down here. So what you weren't able to hear, this banana, is where we hear our sounds. So when we were in the hearing, that unfair hearing test, you weren't able to hear those sounds anymore because they took out those frequencies. So people with hearing loss, if they're in this mild range, which is right along in here, they have a really hard time hearing sounds such as K and Z and V. And that's why some people have a hard time with speech, right? They have a hard time understanding your speech because they're not hearing all of those sounds and all those syllables and the consonants. They're having a really hard time. So they hear very broken and fragment parts of speech. So that's just a little understanding of where speech fits into our hearing loss. So there are three different types of hearing loss. We have our conductive, the sensory neural hearing loss, and a mixed hearing loss. Conductive hearing loss is the type of hearing loss that occurs from the outer or middle ear. This can be something such as wax buildup or a perforated eardrum, which just means your eardrum is ruptured. You have an ear infection. Ear infections cause hearing loss. And while these may just be momentary things, they are treatable, usually by surgery. They can be treated by medicine, ear drops. They clear up an ear infection. But over here we have the audiogram and what it looks like if you have a hearing loss, a conductive hearing loss. It means that your bone conduction, so what you're hearing through this bone back here, and your air conduction, what you're taking out, there's more than a 10 decibel difference. So not that you guys would probably ever have to look at an audiogram and determine someone's hearing loss. This is just interesting to know, when you're taking hearing tests, if your audiologist says like, oh, you have a conductive loss, they're looking at something similar to this over here. The next kind of hearing loss is a sensory neural hearing loss. So this is the hearing loss that occurs from the inner ear, back in that cochlea. There's something happening in there. Normally, this is at the cilia, those hairs that are moving with the liquid, they're dead now. So instead of being nice and upwards like this, they're just falling over, and they're not moving anymore. So they're not making that electrical energy that can be sent to your brain. This happens from aging, from sound exposure, which as firefighters, that you guys have a lot of loud sound exposure, that this is what's happening. Your cilia, they're dying due to all that sound. This can also be caused from infection or from a genetic disorder. This is usually treatable with hearing aids because it can intensify the sound, or with cochlear implants, which we'll go into these technologies a little bit later on. Now, if you have a mixed hearing loss, this means that you have both. You have a mixture of this conductive and you have a mixture of sensory hearing loss. So this might be that you have an infection, but at the same time, you've been exposed to a lot of loud sound. So while the conductive loss may be able to be treated, you can get those eardrops, you can clear that away. You may not be able to treat that sensory neural hearing loss. And this is where I put my little 2 cents in, that Q-tips are not a good way to fix a conductive hearing loss. That Q-tips are one of the most destructive things that you can use in your ear, because if you have wax buildup, you're actually just pushing it further down. So if you have wax buildup, that's something that your doctor is specially trained to be able to take care of. So that's my little spiel right there. All right, so Cynthia's gonna come here and do these myth conceptions with you.
All right, let's see what you guys really know. So if you flip over the first page where the unfair hearing test, you'll see this. See it? All right, so truth or false? Which one? False? Correct. Most deaf and hard of hearing people use sign language to communicate. False? False. Sign language is international. False? False. Guys know. Noisy work environments don't bother deaf people. False? Why? Good. All right, so most people are skilled lip readers. False? False. And you'll see something later on that will help you out understand why. So deaf people are not allowed to obtain driver's license. False. You'll be surprised how many people think that's true. So most deaf people learn how to read Braille. False. Deaf people cannot use the telephone. False. So most deaf people are mute. False. Interpreters sign word for word what is spoken. False. You guys are pretty smart. You guys know some stuff. All right.
Okay, so one of the big things is what to call somebody with a hearing loss. And you would think something like hearing impaired or hearing disabled would be more sensitive, but it actually kind of implies that they're broken. Impaired, it means that it's broken, it's not working, as does disabled. And the word deaf seems kind of frightening to people for some reason. I think because people think that when you call someone deaf, you're being like, you're deaf, you have a problem. That's not how the deaf community is, though. They prefer deaf with a big D, means that they're culturally deaf. They sign deaf pride, they're proud to be deaf, they wouldn't want to be hearing. Little d just means that they have hearing loss and they would be classified as deaf, and hard of hearing is more like what you heard in the unfair hearing test. So anything that's crossed off is not something you would ever want to call a deaf person, despite what you might have heard.
So no hearing impaired.
No,
No
hearing
hearing
impaired. Yeah. A big D means that they're culturally deaf and that they identify themselves with the deaf community. They have deaf pride. They would hope to have deaf children, and they use sign language. They want to promote sign language and preserve it. I had a teacher, one of my deaf teachers, who said that I'm not deaf, I'm deaf, and this is the sign for deaf. So she's just it's when you're proud to be deaf. You're proud to be identified as somebody who is deaf.
You just said those people are,
Big D.
Big D wants to have deaf children as well?
Well, yes,
That's what they hope.
that's what they would hope to have.
Just to, yeah.
Just like hearing children.
Sure.
It's like for the fair. Oh, I thought I saw that. That was interesting.
Yeah, deaf, I'm not certain why people seem to think that they're the same word, but they do. Ready to go to the next one?
Next.
Okay, so age of onset means like what age someone becomes deaf, and it's very important because if someone is born deaf, they grow up, they go to a deaf school, they sign their entire life, they're culturally deaf. They are going to be deaf. Whereas if any of us right now, as having grown up being hearing people, became deaf, it would be a very hard adjustment for us, and we would be less likely to identify ourselves as deaf, more likely to identify as hard of hearing, and probably more likely to try to get a hearing aid or a cochlear implant instead of just embracing it. Modes of communication is what the person uses to communicate on a daily basis. ASL, or American Sign Language, is the language of the deaf community, just like English is the American language. Contact signing is when it's mixed in with other sort of languages, like when somebody signs ASL, which has different grammar than English. If they're contact signing, it means that sometimes they put some English nuances in. It's kind of like Spanglish is. Signed English is when you sign precisely what the person is saying, so it's just English word order, English grammar with the signs put onto it. And it's very difficult to understand because if you think of words like butterfly, it would be butterfly in ASL, but butterfly, if you separate it, is a stick of butter flying in the air. And so you can't actually translate everything precisely because it simply won't make sense. Sign-supported speech is when you help out when you're speaking by adding little signs occasionally. Simultaneous communication is when signing and speaking happens at the same time the whole time. And obviously using an interpreter would be someone speaking and someone else signing. Cued speech is kind of interesting because it helps children see speech and kind of learn how to lip read, and there's different locations that help with consonants, like pat and bat look very similar. Cued speech helps show the differentiation between the two. Auditory oral, auditory verbal, those are not really anything people use a lot right now, but total communication is really, really big in schools. A lot of people use total communication, which is kind of like sim-comming. Writing down, passing notes, and drawing pictures and gesturing, none of these are you're not going to be able to get a detailed message across, but if you have to communicate in a certain way, you have to find some way to communicate. Lip reading and speech, a lot of people think that if a deaf person can lip read a little bit, that they can just talk, and that's really not how it is. Lip reading is very difficult, and I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with bad lip reading. There are these funny videos, so we're gonna take a look at them. You can see how words really look different than they actually are.
Egg roll. I wish I had a breeze running down my leg. I'd kill for a cookie. Stingray, a double-sided Scooby snack. Yeah, we pick our hotel. Help me burn that old man.
I can't,
Yes,
dude.
you can. Let's freaking burn that guy. Hit him on the eyeball. Hey, don't offend me.
Can I have this sloth?
A skunk. I mean, I can't believe there's a manhole and he fell in it. I want it now. I want cake now. I want it now. I found Fido. Hey, I found Fido. I found Fido, you guys.
Stank. Ham bowl.
Hey, I'd love to get you a Mai Tai. Yeah, come on, I'll make it myself. Is that a bother?
What's wrong with him?
Ooh, I'm white.
Stop doing heroin.
I dare you to spit in that guy's drink. I
went out with a girl this weekend, and we just kept having a ball. Then I come over to hang out after the game, and it's just, the floor's just beanbags. So that's when I'm a jerk to her, because I'm all, "Come pick up all your floor bags. You ain't living in Southeast Asia."
You gotta make a 45-degree like this. Use froggy voice when you ate old fruit salad. I encompass and I eclipse. Got the hiccups.
The vet said,
Okay, so they actually looked like they were saying that, didn't they? And they certainly were not saying that, but I love their videos. They have a lot of them, and it kind of gives you a good sense of, you don't actually, if you stopped hearing something and just saw somebody speaking, you don't know what they were saying. There's no way. Okay, so communicating one-on-one, which is important in also an emergency situation. So you want to get the attention of the deaf person first. If they can't see you, they're never going to know that you're trying to talk to them. Maintain eye contact. Your eyes tell a lot. There's very little of the meaning that's actually in the words, especially in English. Always face the person, because body language, everything contributes to meaning. And if light is behind you, it causes a silhouette, and it's very difficult to see any facial features or anything. If you're trying to get a deaf person's attention, tap their shoulder lightly, kind of like this. You don't want to touch their hands, don't want to touch their sides. The shoulder is the ideal place to do that. If you wave your hands, if they're far away, they have better, deaf people, if you lose one sense, other senses become better. I think that's something that we kind of all know. And so their vision, their peripheral vision is much better than your average hearing person. So if you're gonna wave your hands, they're more likely to see you. Flashing lights is great. They use it in classrooms. Our deaf teachers all flash the lights when they want our attention. And stomping on the floor will help them feel a vibration. And if you can actually ask if someone's deaf. It's not offensive. And the way you do that is you say deaf you, and you make like this question face. So you raise your eyebrows, deaf you, and they'll say yes, no, or if they're not deaf and they're just confused, then they're just gonna be more confused. Okay, so some technology deaf people use, you guys all got that question, that misconception question right, that deaf people actually can use the phone. They have the video relay service, but be careful, because if you're answering the phone, you hear, "This is Swanson relay service," don't hang up, they're not trying to sell you anything, deaf person's trying to call you. The video phone is what deaf people would use to communicate with each other, sort of like Skype, except it's its own machine, and so you see the other person's face. Video remote interpreting is really cool, and that's what they would use if someone was in a remote area, a deaf person was in a remote area and they needed like medical treatment, there was no interpreter. You can get an interpreter on your like little iPad that will interpret, but the downside is if you don't have Wi-Fi or any way to get the internet, you can't use it. Captioning, we all know captioning. There's open captioning, which is always on, that you'd see in a foreign film. Closed captioning, you can turn it on. Technology, fire alarms that flash, and doorbells actually can flash too, as can the telephone, and alarm clocks can vibrate too.
Okie dokie. All right, so we're gonna go through a few of these deaf matters, okay? Just read through and tell me what you think you would do. So, when two people are in a conversation in a narrow public area, like a hallway or a store alley, and you need to pass by, what should you do? And when I say someone's having a conversation, we're talking about two deaf people signing, and you're like, oh no, what should I do? What do you think? No? Don't know?
Get their attention. Say, excuse me, and walk behind them so you're not in.
Okay, that's one answer. Any other answers? No? Well, can't imagine what to do? Okay. Well, for a hearing person in our culture, that's what we would do. We would, oh no, excuse me. Or walk around, or it's a little disruptive actually for a deaf person. Really, they prefer for you just to walk right on through. Same pace, natural, normal pace. Don't need to slow down or anything. Nope, because they're more a visual person. So if they see you trying to crouch around or find a way to get around, that interrupts them. Like, they're like, what is going on with that person? What? Why are they walking? What is going on?
Hallway, and they're face to face like this. If you're walking right through the middle of it, is that thing disrespectful?
No, not at all, because it happens in a flash.
Oh, okay.
You're gone. I don't need to worry about you in my way. No. And it's more of a visual thing. So if someone's signing to me over there or over there, it doesn't matter if people are in the way. I can definitely see some hands moving. Okay, for the next one. If I don't like the way someone has done something, should I tell them? And this question really refers to a deaf person in the workplace, or if in a class, or if you're just friends with them. Like, you think, oh, man, they're so loud, or because they can't voice, or they're being obnoxious, or you shouldn't do it that way, you should be more organized. Do you think you would tell them, or what do you think you would do? Well, that's right, you should. Most of the time in deaf culture, you typically are very blunt. They want you to tell them. In hearing culture, if you were at work, the system is, let me tell you something nice about you first. And let me tell you something that you need to work on. And then let me end it with something really nice. But you're doing really good. Don't worry about it. You're really good at customer service, but you really need to work on your speed. But you're really nice to the customers. So you want to be really blunt. Don't worry about if it offends them or not. They're really harsh anyway. Okay, another one. Sometimes it's hard to find parking when I come for an appointment. When I arrive late, do I need to tell anyone why I'm late? Now, what would anybody typically do? They come in late to an appointment. Do they just say, sorry, sit down? Or call another time. Well, typically, if you come to a class late, you just sneak right in real slow, try to not disturb everybody, you try to sit down and just go about the class. Well, for deaf people, they look at you when they're waiting. Like, why, what happened? Please tell me. So it's best to tell why you're late, or so they can help, you can help the other people inside the room. Oh, there's an accident such and such way, so they can find another way. Because deaf people can't listen to the radio, and for them to say, oh man, 695 back up, or stuff like that. So it's helpful. Got one more, okay? I haven't seen my friend Anne in a while. I recently bumped into her, and I noticed that she put on a lot of weight. Should I mention this to her? What do you think? Well, I already gave you a hint. Yeah, you're right, Jackie. The answer is yes. Just like I said earlier, deaf people are blunt. They want to know that you care about them. If they know, last time I saw you, you were this thin, and now you're a couple of pants' size bigger. They want to know and show some concern. Like, oh man, what happened? I see you put on some weight. It makes them feel like you noticed, you're paying attention, and you care. Okay? Okay.
I ain't doing that.
I know, it's a little different. Yeah, okay. Now I'm gonna go into some interpreting information that you're gonna need to know sometime. I'm sure you're gonna hire an interpreter. Now, you probably don't know, but a lot of interpreters that are just starting out don't have a lot of experience. So they mostly stick to some standard jobs, like working with employers, sitting down in a meeting, maybe some entertainment kind of workshop, or things that are a little bit simpler. In the interpreting field, you need actually special certification in things like legal, medical, and education. And I know that you probably will work with more standard interpreters, so also pay attention to what their certification level is. Some people think, oh, they're intermediate level, they're so good, they're fine, because most other languages, when you're intermediate, that's good. Not in ASL. You need to be extremely proficient in sign language, because there's a lot that you can misunderstand with translating English into ASL. It's a whole nother ballgame. And later on, we'll explain more about ASL in one language, okay? Let me get to a little bit more on interpreting. Now, these are some places that you can hire interpreters. I have a separate page, the last page I gave you, that has some information on interpreting agencies as well as remote interpreting providers. Now, there's some on top. Here we go. Access. That's a regular interpreter business. You just call, hey, what's up? I need an interpreter. This time, this place. The second one, we have Brindum, which is a deaf-owned company. Still can call. They still have some hearing people there. They answer the phone, and if not, they work through a relay system, and you can still call. CIRS is actually a nonprofit interpreting company. Now, I know that you might want to have some classes for your trainees. This is the place to go if you want to have someone come over to the training center, hire someone, teach a couple of classes. They come to your agency and teach you. So you can call them, look up the website. I left the website on the paper as well. And RID is just like any kind of registry, like a daycare registry or things like that. You can look it up through the name, the location, zip code. Just put it all in. You don't have to have the exact name, but you can just put in the location, and it'll show you all the agencies, even freelance interpreters that will come and provide services. Earlier, we explained what remote interpreting is. You have to have a computer and internet access. That's for last minute things, mostly medical. Sometimes the agencies will call out to another interpreter to show up inside situations like in police or fire things. Sometimes I know that firefighters don't always do fires, they do other things too. So when it's an emergency like that, you can get something really fast through that if you have the internet, or you can call one of these agencies and you can get an interpreter immediately. They're on call 24 hours, okay? Okay, now these are some ways, info about using an interpreter. I also have a page on the back that has all this information about how to use an interpreter, what you should do, or what's going on when you're using an interpreter. So first, let me explain that interpreting, an interpreter, I guess, is only to relay whatever information you want to the deaf person. You talk straight to the deaf person. You don't need to talk to the interpreter. Hey, can you tell her for me that I want such and such and such and such? Nope, don't need to do that. Talk right to the deaf person. The interpreter will do the rest. Don't even worry about it. And let's see. When you call up an interpreting agency, make sure you let them know what language a deaf person uses, because it's varying. Like she said earlier, the modes of communication are varying between each deaf person. So ask the deaf person that's coming, or the family member, or whatever situation it is, what language they use, so that you can get the right interpreter. As well as expect that an interpreting agency, most of the time, their rates are a minimum of 2 hours. So no matter what it is, you're gonna get charged for 2 hours. If it's a longer time period than that, then you might have to have a second interpreter, and you will probably have to pay for that same interpreter the same time, same rate. So just giving you a little bit of information about that. And let me explain why there would probably be 2 interpreters. Well, one time, interpreting is a lot of hand movement. Just like when you're picking up something a bunch or jackhammering for a long time, it can cause some carpal tunnel if you continue to do that for a long period of time. And it can also affect the rate at which an interpreter translates. At some time, they're gonna break off and things are not gonna start sounding right, and the deaf person's like, what? And it's just like, I need a break. So, there's some deaf information for you. Yeah, go ahead.
We used deaf interpreters at our last 2 or 3 graduations.
Yeah.
And we got them from Citizen Services, and we had to hire 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they never asked whether it would be in English, or I guess they assumed.
They assume if you don't say anything, an ASL interpreter will come on the spot. And then they'll show up and then they'll say, hey, this deaf person doesn't use ASL. Well, great, now we have to bring out somebody else. You cite, and you're probably gonna end up having to pay for it, that interpreter that showed up and the one that's about to arrive. So it's best sometimes to just ask. Yep, Miss Jackie?
And when you're planning for like large groups like that, is there a preference as to which one you will go with? Using ASL, English, or both?
Typically, it's probably an ASL interpreter that will come, unless you already know, hey, this person needs oral translation, or they're more of sign English, or there's other methods too, where they don't even do sign language, they just kind of do cues, which just tells them what sound that the English word is making. But it's best to always just know. It's always a minimum rate of 2 hours. And they have different rates. That's why I gave you a large list of agencies that you can call so you can look through and see what you prefer. Okie dokie. I guess so.
Finger spell a word to them, and they'll know what you mean. Maybe not a whole entire sentence, because there's a lot of letters. So.
All right, we'll start off. So we'll start off with A.
Yeah, you have a paper.
There is a chart that will help you.
Yeah, so you can, and we're gonna be around here to show you too.
Okay, so start off with A. Got it? We'll go to B. C. D. But the thing.
Point your fingers up.
There you go.
Rocking.
No.
My fingers aren't working.
There you go.
There you go. D. All right, we got it? All right, so then we'll move to E. It's kind of like C, but curl your fingers in. All
Or
right?
you can do sitting it on your thumb. Either way, whichever's easier for you.
So then we'll move to F. F.
I'm all great to get to.
We'll move to G.
Say a little bit.
You're already on H,
Yeah,
sir.
a
You know
little
what you're doing.
Who's on one? Just saying hi.
McKenna.
Oh, no, never mind.
Yeah. There you go. G. Yep.
And don't move your hand from here.
H.
Just stick out one more finger.
The thumb goes down. Yep. The thumb goes down. Then we'll go to I. Pinky goes up. So then J. J. Just making a J.
That easy.
So then K.
That might be a little bit harder. Yeah, but you can't touch your
It's like
maybe you can touch.
right there in the middle. Yep. Just like that.
Oh. There we go. Right. Oh, nope. There we go.
There you go. There you go.
You're not used to it. So,
All right.
trust me, they made us do this over and over again.
So L is easy. So then M. Right. Yep.
Right? Yeah.
So your thumb is going
Touching your-
between your pinky and then your ring finger.
Yeah.
You have an M. And then you put it down. Just relax it down. It's just
All right, we got it. Then we're gonna move to N. So So just move your thumb over one. Yep. So then we're gonna go.
Yeah, 'cause it doesn't look like anything right now. I'm trying to put your thumb on.
Yep, it gets pretty sloppy.
Yeah, sits up a little bit.
So then, O, just an O, easy. So then remember K, P, B down.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Then we go to Q.
It's a G.
It's the G, but
Upside down.
upside down. Yep.
Pointing down. G, pointing down. Yeah, very good.
So then R,
Like a promise.
just cross the first two. Yep. S, just you put your thumb up. Yep. So then T,
That one's doing pretty good.
right in between this, right there. I know.
Yes.
There you go. Then U. Yep. Then B. Separate. Yep. W. So then we got X. Yep, just a hook. Then we got Y. And then Z. Z. There you go. That's the alphabet.
A little bit hard, I know. Get those fingers working.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna learn a few other signs that will help.
Yeah, since all credits kept getting some of it.
All right, so we'll just give you a little background on ASL. So where did ASL come from? It was brought over by the French. Okay, so then it was adopted by American Deaf from French Sign Language. So ASL uses grammatical structures adopted by French Sign Language. Okay, so real language. Well, actually, it was created by deaf people. So we'll learn some signs that will help you guys out when you are out trying to help deaf people and like how you can communicate with them.
Okay. We'll start with, what is your name?
So you would go, name, what? Name, what? So then their fingers spell their name.
And if they know you're hearing, they'll very slowly
They'll
do it. We still struggle with finger
And it's
spelling.
okay to ask for them to tell you again. So if you didn't get it the first time, again. They're very nice and they'll until you get it.
Yes.
So then, nice to meet you. So you're just gonna go nice, meet. Nice to meet you. Yep. You.
And even if that's as far as you get in the conversation, the fact that you reach out to them is very important. So these are two important sentences to know. Next we have, how are you?
So, how? Yep. Yep.
Great.
So then, hi, bye. Hi.
Oh, yeah.
There's also, there's the deaf hello. If you like see a deaf person, like she's deaf, I'd be like, oh, hello. It's like a deaf greeting. It's kind of like tip of the hat.
It does feel like that.
Yeah. Next, I please.
Please.
Big.
And also, with that, I would say thank you.
Thank you.
Please and thank you.
Please, thank you. So then, fine. So this one would help you out a lot where it's saying, I'm here to help you. So you would just explain who you are. So I'm a fireman.
Or if you're pleasing it, please.
Yeah, police.
See? You're please.
Police. So fireman. So fireman. So I'm here to help you. So this is help. So help. Yep. So I'm a fireman. Yep. Where?
They'll probably just point
They'll
somewhere.
point to
like,
where
my
they're.
arm,
Yeah.
my leg.
So just, pain where. So again, so I'm here to assist you. Like, how can I help? Like, can I help you? Help you. Like, I'm here to help you.
Or if you say like, how can I help?
Yep. How can I
How
help?
can I help you?
Yeah, and just raise your eyebrows so they know that you're asking. If you're asking, can I help you? Can I help you?
Are there any other things that you feel like are very important to know and we be able to answer for you or show you the signs? Even in everyday conversation.
Can you run through the system?
Yeah,
Run
sure.
through it. Okay,
Let's
so-
do it.
So, do you guys remember first one? What's your name? Name what? Yep. Name what? All right, I'm gonna quiz you guys after this. So nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Okay. So how are you? How are you? All right. So hello. Hi. So then please, and then fine. It's fine. So I'm here to help you. I'm a fireman. Here to help you. I'm a cop. Yeah, I'm a cop. Here to help you.
We don't want to cop.
So where are you in pain? Where? Or pain? Pain where? Yep. So then, or how can I help you? So how help you? All right, are you guys ready to be quizzed? All right, my point.
I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, was there anything you guys wanted to know?
Just conversationally, if it's like, I really want to know how to say the word apple.
Does smoke alarm, smoke detector fall into any sign language?
Yeah.
What, like what's the sign for it?
Yeah.
It's alarm. So this is alarm, and this is fire.
How about like functioning or working?
Oh,
Oh,
now
so
you're getting
working.
working stuff.
Like if it was work, like I want to know if it's working or anything like that. I mean, we could always test it, but still.
Functioning or work.
Or work.
Work or
function.
Function. So alarm, and then you put the left hand, it's like this, and you make an F with your right hand, and it goes like this against it. This means function. There's your fire alarm, and most likely if it's a deaf person, they'll have a flashing fire alarm in their home. So it's a fire alarm, if you fire an alarm with flashing, it's functioning.
How about where's the fire?
So fire, where? Fire, where?
So like again, so where? So what?
It's like
Question word comes last.
And you're gonna
What? Where? Last thing you said.
That's that grammatical structure of this. It's kind of like if you've ever learned back in like high school, like Spanish, the way that it's set up, because sign language is adopted from French sign language, so they take the grammatical structure of that, where you have like the subject first and like the question last. Like you do that in Spanish too. So that's kind of sign languages if you remember that. So yeah. Any others? You have fire, where? Maybe like anyone else, like more people. If there's more people in the building, you can ask more. And this is people.
That would be P's. Yeah, P's. Two P. You're making two P's, so
You have more people. You have your eyebrows up.
so they always know that it's
people.
there.
You can point to the bill, like, are there more people there? They'll know what you're saying. They
Yeah.
might give you like a number, like, on their hands, like how many people, or 0, or no.
If they're nodding like this, and it makes no sense to the question that you asked them, they don't understand.
Yeah.
That's called the deaf nod, and they, just like if you're listening to something, like it's just way over your head, but you don't feel like asking somebody to repeat, or you don't feel comfortable because you don't want to look like you're stupid about it, you might be like, yeah, it's the exact same thing, but since they're so used to people just overriding them, they don't want to ask for a repeat because they might think you might either go, oh, it's not important, or say it the same way. So try to rephrase the question or do it slower and help them understand what.
Yeah, always just ask again if they just, you'll No.
They're blank.
Yeah, there's.
Gesturing helps more than you would think too. Like if you can gesture and if there's like an emergency and you're kind of like, oh, fire, like big building, like they're gonna understand what you're trying to say.
How you tell them that you don't understand?
Not understand. This means understand and shake your head no. If I don't understand,
So if you do understand,
I think I understand, but I don't understand.
they'll think about it. You say it's nice to see you again.
So it's nice to see you. So this is nice, see you, and then again. It's nice to see you again.
Again.
Again. Any more?
This is actually a sign taken straight from French because the French word for see starts with a V. So see comes from.
Do you have any others that you guys want to know? Feel free to ask away. Any repeats?
So I have a quick question. So let's say you were in an emergency, right? What would you guys do? What's the first thing you guys would do? Paper? Well, now that you know sign language,
Depends on the emergency.
Yeah.
Depends on the emergency.
depends on the emergency.
Right.
Okay, so let's say there's a fire.
I'll say, come on.
Well, first, the person is not looking at you first.
Right, the person's not being tap on the shoulder.
But if they're not
Correct.
close enough, what do you do?
Stamp my feet.
Yeah.
Wait, yep,
That's
just,
exactly right.
yep, get their attention,
I
yep.
don't know that they're deaf if they're not that close to me.
Exactly.
But would it, if I was jumping up and down, wouldn't you look at me?
But they do that every time we come on an emergency. They're serious. We call 911 jumping jacks. Every time we arrive, people standing there, regardless if they can speak or not speak.
You know, maybe you can ask, like, can you hear me? You know, like, can you hear me? And they'll be like, you know, you can, if you don't think they can hear you, just say, deaf you, and then they'll say, yes, they'll be like, yes, I'm deaf, yeah, you know?
We'll be done then, because they'll think they'll start reeling stuff off.
So let's say once you get them out the house, you know, the fire, everything, you want to see if they're in pain.
You go like, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where?
As long as you remember that one time, you'll be
Send them out, send them out. This is the guy who's send them out.
So basically, we all learn English, most of us, as our first language. That's your L1, your first language. And to be proficient in a second language, you must be proficient in your first. So a lot of these kids don't become proficient in ASL. 90% of deaf kids are born to hearing parents. So they develop their ASL a little bit over time. And so they have to really grasp ASL to even begin to learn English. So they start to learn English at a slower rate. It's a much different grammar structure. And if you don't have the ASL to be able to back up to explain English, they kind of just start to fall behind and they become very dependent on their ASL. So that's basically why.
When it comes to the relay service, there's multiple services inside of the state. I put down a few that provide radio relay interpreting, but not exactly the same. We have Sorensen and Purple. They're really major companies inside Maryland right now that provide the relay service. When you have a deaf person that's calling you, their number is not going to be the same if you're calling them either. It's probably going to start with 763 or 800 something. Like you're going to think that's an 800 number. It's not. It's just a relay number. They have to use number out there that other people aren't using. So when they first call and you pick up, you'll say hello. Hello, I am from Sorensen Relay Service. I am about to connect you to a deaf person. And when you're on the relay, you need to make sure if there's anything specific that you're gonna say, your name, like places and buildings, spell them out for the relay service person because they have locations that are all over America, and that relay person could be from Ohio and not understand any of the parts of Maryland or the suburb area. So you might want to really just think about those things, speak your name, spell it out. My name's David, D, you know, or Cockeysville or places like that, because they're gonna need to know when you're on the phone with them. Just be polite. The process for a relay service is a little bit slower. It's not gonna be the same as me talking to you. It's gonna be slow. Have some kind of patience. It's not that slow, but it's not gonna be as quick as you think. Changing your words over to ASL is just a little bit of delay.
Like, it'd be like this. If Cynthia called me, she's the deaf consumer, and she's calling me, I'm just one of her hearing friends. So, and Kiani is our interpreter. So she would sign, like, I would pick up the phone and be like, oh, okay, Cynthia's calling me. And now she would let her know, like, okay, I've picked up the phone. So Cynthia would probably say, go for it.
Hi, how are you?
So I'd be like, oh, I'm great, haven't talked to you in a while. Now she's gonna have to take the time on the video to take what I've said and have her do it. So there's kind of this lag time because she has to take the time to listen to everything I've said, interpret it for her, wait for her response, get it back to me in voicing, and this is how our entire conversation is going to be. So it takes, that's that time lapse that she's talking about, takes a little bit of time.
Give some patience, but have an understanding. You can talk somewhat normal. Don't like do one word at a time. And even when you have an interpreter, please don't ever do one word at a time. It actually makes it harder for the interpreter. We don't see the whole picture of your sentence so that we can translate it. So don't stop at every word, don't stop at every sentence. Just keep a good pace. Just talk normal, okay? And when you're on the phone relay, maybe you might want to pay attention to if the interpreter is going to say something like, hold on, she's saying this, or I'm getting some feedback. Hold on a moment. Just expect that, okay? Is there anything else you guys wanted to know about?
Any questions from anything we've covered?
So now that you know some knowledge, spread the word. You know, make sure you get it out there.
Yeah. Now you're aware.
Now you're aware.
Do you have a question?
Any more?
No? Sorry.
No? Okay.
I pulled the teacher move. I was like, oh, something in your throat.
Let's give them a round.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.